From child prodigy to distinguished maestro, in over 70 years of music making, he moved the hearts of countless audiences with exquisite beauty, profound meaning, and message of peace. Daniel Barenboim, A Life Fostering Peace Through Music, Part 1 of 2. Continue watching to find out more.
A friendly fire from the residents of North Ossetia, Alania means hello in the native Ossetian language. I am Svetlana. The hospitable citizens of North Ossetia, Alania, thank you for choosing peace and compassion to usher humanity further into the golden era. Welcome to our program, Daniel Barenboim, A Life Fostering Peace Through Music, Part 1 of 2. One of the greatest classical musicians of our time, Mr. Daniel Barenboim, is an internationally celebrated pianist, conductor, and humanist. Ever since his debut performance as a piano soloist at the age of 7, he has been seen on many prestigious stages and has become especially revered for his interpretations of the works of Mozart, Beethoven, and other classical and romantic composers. As a legendary conductor, he leads the world's finest orchestras in a rich repertoire of work, including symphonies, chamber music, and operas. Throughout his musical career, Mr. Barenboim has been honored with many awards and accolades, including 6 Grammy Awards, the Grand Cross of the Order of Merit of the Federal Republic of Germany, Knight Grand Cross of the Order of Merit of the Italian Republic, and Honorary Knight Commander of the Order of the British Empire, Edison Award for Lifetime Achievement, and Premium Imperiale in Japan, to name just a few. Apart from his extraordinary artistic achievements, Mr. Barenboim is renowned for his courageous and earnest efforts to promote peace, open-mindedness, and free dialogue through music. In 1999, he co-founded the West-Eastern Divan Orchestra to promote communication and unity among musicians from Israel and the Arab countries. His humanitarian efforts have earned him numerous distinctions, such as the Wolf Prize, Otto Hahn Peace Medal, International Service Award for the Global Defense of Human Rights, and Dresden Peace Prize. The United Nations also named him a Messenger of Peace in 2007, and he has been granted citizenship for both Israel and Palestine. Born in Buenos Aires, Argentina, on November 15, 1942, Daniel Barenboim grew up in a family of Jewish Russian immigrants. Both of his parents were professional pianists, and his piano lessons with his mother started at the age of 5. He later continued to study piano with his father, who remained his only other piano teacher. Before reaching the age of 8, young Daniel gave his formal debut as a piano performer in Buenos Aires. A year later, he performed in Salzburg and then Vienna and Rome. In 1952, his family settled in Israel. At the age of 12, Daniel started attending master classes in conducting, which were taught by the eminent composer and conductor Igor Markevich. He also met and played for the renowned German conductor and composer Wilhelm Furtwängler in the same summer. It was Mr. Furtwängler who inspired young Daniel to become a conductor when he saw the maestro conduct a performance of Bach's oratorio, St. Matthew Passion, in Buenos Aires in 1950. Young Daniel's rare talent indelibly impressed Mr. Furtwängler. With deep appreciation, the conductor invited Daniel to perform Beethoven's Piano Concerto No. 1 with him in the acclaimed Berlin Philharmonic Orchestra. Even though Daniel couldn't make the trip, Wilhelm Furtwängler still cherished his exceptional musical gift and emphasized his talent in a recommendation letter. The 11-year-old Barenboim is a phenomenon, he ardently remarked. Wilhelm Furtwängler remains an important influence on Daniel's artistic endeavors. Later, in 2002, Mr. Barenboim made a Grammy Award-nominated recording by conducting the Chicago Symphony in the American premiere of Furtwängler's Second Symphony to pay a tribute to this great but much misunderstood musician. After attending master classes in conducting, the piano prodigy went to Fontainebleau, France, to study music theory and composition with one of the most celebrated music teachers of the time, Nadia Boulanger. Meanwhile, he gave classical performances on various international stages, including Paris in 1955, London with the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra in 1956, and the Carnegie Hall in New York in 1957 under the primary conductor of the period, Leopold Stokowski. All these dazzling concerts were performed before Daniel reached the age of 15. It was in 1954 when Mr. Barenboim made his first solo gramophone recordings. They included the most important works in the piano repertoire, such as piano sonatas and concertos by Mozart, Beethoven, and Brahms. In his earlier recording career, he focused more on the music of the classical and romantic era. By the late 1990s, he expanded his musical repertoire to include pieces by Baroque, 20th century classical, as well as jazz and folk music composers. In 1957, Mr. Barenboim started devoting more time to conducting and made his debut as conductor in Haifa, Israel. Starting in 1964, he kindled a close relationship with the English Chamber Orchestra as both conductor and pianist. They performed frequently in England and toured all over Europe, as well as the United States, Japan, India, and Australia. A few years later, Mr. Barenboim was invited to conduct for the Philharmonic Orchestra in London and the Berlin Philharmonic. Since then, for over half of a century, he became a conductor in demand with many of the world's leading orchestras and opera houses. In 1966, Mr. Barenboim met the gifted cellist Jacqueline Dupri. They gave concerts together in Jerusalem, Tel Aviv, and a few other cities in Israel during the period of the Six-Day Arab-Israel conflict in June 1967. Jacqueline converted to Judaism, and they married at the Western Wall, Jerusalem, in the same month. Daniel and Jacqueline's romance and brilliant talents made them the darlings of the classical music world. Together, they performed around the world and also made a few exceptional recordings which earned them several Grammy Awards nominations. Their collaboration with their musician friends Itzhak Perlman, Pinchas Zuckerman, and Zubin Mehta made the legendary Schubert Trot Quintet performance at the Queen Elizabeth Hall in London in 1969. The precious occasion was recorded in Christopher Newpen's award-winning documentary film, Franz Schubert, The Trout, The Greatest Love and the Greatest Sorrow. However, the couple's collaborative musical aspirations were disrupted tragically by Jacqueline's illness in 1979 when she was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. due to the severity of her illness, she was forced to retire from her music career and passed away in 1987. In 1973, Mr. Barenboim conducted Mozart's Don Giovanni at the Edinburgh Festival, which marked his debut as an opera conductor. 2 years later, he was appointed as music director of l'Orchestre de Paris, and his tenure lasted for 14 years. During that period, he conducted more contemporary music by composers such as Lutosławski, Berio, Bulli, Henze, Dutilleux, and Takemitsu. In the meantime, Mr. Barenboim also performed as pianist and guest conductor with other orchestras and opera houses. In 1976, he was honored with his first Grammy Award by winning in the Classical Album of the Year category for his Beethoven, the 5 piano concertos recording. In the same year, his collaboration with Miss Dupree for the complete Beethoven sonatas for cello was nominated for the Best Chamber Music Performance. Mr. Barenboim was named Music Director Designate of the Chicago Symphony Orchestra in 1989 and succeeded the retired Sir Georg Scholti as the music director 2 years later. The post lasted until the summer of 2006, and the orchestra voted him as honorary conductor for life. Their collaboration resulted in many notable recordings and exuberant performances. Between 1992 and 2002, Mr. Barenboim became the General Music Director of the Staatsoper Unter den Linden, also known as the Berlin State Opera. And in 2000, he was named Chief Conductor for Life of its orchestra. Under Mr. Barenboim's leadership, they worked on large-scale cycles, namely Richard Wagner's 10 major operas, Beethoven's Symphony Cycle, Mozart's Da Ponte operas, Mozart's piano concertos, Bruckner and Mahler's symphony cycles, plus many more. In addition to these classical romantic repertoires, they have also focused on contemporary music, such as Elliott Carter's only opera, What's Next?, and Sir Harrison Birtwistle's The Last Supper. Mr. Barenboim and the Berlin State Opera were honored with the Wilhelm Furtwängler Prize Award in 2003 for their outstanding accomplishments. Welcome to our program, Daniel Barenboim, A Life Fostering Peace Through Music, Part 2 of 2. In the last part of our program, we introduced Mr. Daniel Barenboim's gifted musical talent in his childhood and furtherance of his musical training. Not only did his piano performance become internationally acclaimed, but his conducting brilliance was also widely recognized by the world's major orchestras and opera houses. Now we continue to learn more about Mr. Barenboim's ongoing endeavors for artistic perfection and his unique approach to promoting peace and dialogue through music. With a true humanist heart, Mr. Barenboim has cared for the victims of all conflicts, especially the ongoing hostilities between Israel and Palestine, which surrounded him at the time. In a London hotel lobby in 1993, Mr. Barenboim met the late Palestinian-American literary scholar and cultural critic Edward Said. It was a chance meeting that led them to a friendship bearing many inspiring cultural and humanistic works. They collaborated to achieve their shared vision of coexistence and peace in the Middle East. In 1999, two groundbreaking steps were taken towards this courageous aspiration. In February, Mr. Barenboim became the first Israeli artist to perform publicly in the territory since the Six-Day Conflict in 1967. He gave a piano recital on the West Bank at the Birzeit University in Palestine to bring beauty and goodwill to the Palestinians. On August 16, 1999, after 2 years of preparation, Mr. Barenboim and Mr. Said jointly founded the West-Eastern Divan Orchestra after a summer workshop. They named the orchestra and workshop after a collection of lyrical poems, West-Eastern Divan, by the German literary giant Johann Wolfgang von Goethe. It was a significant work advocating exchanges among world cultures. The West-Eastern Divan Orchestra is composed of an equal number of Israeli and Arab young talents, along with members from Turkey, Iran, and Spain. Their mission is to perform in all the countries represented in the orchestra. Through this musical platform, the young generation of musicians can engage in intercultural dialogue to listen, discuss, and learn about each other while overcoming hostilities and prejudices. Today, the orchestra has grown into a unique and significant musical body in the international classical music world, giving concerts in prestigious venues such as the BBC Proms, Salzburg festivals, Teatro alla Scala in Milan, the Musikverein in Vienna, Carnegie Hall in New York, Salle Pleyel in Paris, and many more. The orchestra was designated a UN Global Advocate for Cultural Understanding in February 2016. As the millennium turned onto its new page, the music world held major events commemorating Mr. Barenboim's 50 years of performance as pianist, chamber musician, conductor, and teacher. These events took place in the cities marked in the maestro's life, namely Berlin, Chicago, New York, and the Teatro Colón in Buenos Aires, Argentina, where he debuted as a pianist on that exact date half a century before. After 13 encores, the 3-hour concert in the Teatro Colón ended before the Opera House closed its doors in a memorable note for both the beloved musician and his ecstatic audience. The year 2002 marked Mr. Barenboim's 60th birthday, a year in which the indefatigable musician packed his time with prolific events. Having his contract as the general music director of the Staatsoper Berlin renewed, Mr. Barenboim continued to lead the orchestra to produce monumental works, including 2 complete cycles of Wagner's 10 major operas and 3 of his sold-out ring cycles in Japan. As a soloist, he performed Beethoven's Sonata cycle at the Teatro Colón and then returned to Ramallah, Palestine for another piano recital. He also celebrated his birthday by performing 2 Brahms piano concertos at a benefit concert for Staatsoper Berlin with the Indian conductor Zubin Mehta. In the same year, his autobiography, Daniel Barenboim, A Life in Music, was reprinted with the expansion of 6 new chapters. He also released a book that was written together with Mr. Said, Parallels and Paradoxes, Explorations in Music and Society. Wise viewers will now pause for a moment to hear a brief message. We'll return shortly. Please stay tuned to Supreme Master Television.
Be veg, go green to save the planet.
Welcome back to our show on the world-renowned pianist, conductor, and humanist, Mr. Daniel Barenboim. In the summer of 2003, Mr. Barenboim performed an all-Beethoven recital at the French School in Ramallah, Palestine. He also announced several plans to promote music in the country, which involved assisting the Birzeit University with instruments and tuition, forming the Palestine Youth Orchestra, and introducing music to the school curriculum.
1, 2, 3.
Mr. Barenboim received many honors and awards for his achievements towards reconciliation and peace. One of them was the Wolf Prize, which is an international award granted in Israel. Mr. Barenboim contributed $50,000 of the award towards music education projects in both Israel and Ramallah. In his speech at the ceremony, he stated, "I am asking today with deep sorrow, can the Jewish people, whose history is a record of continued suffering and relentless persecution, allow themselves to be indifferent to the rights and suffering of a neighboring people?" During the early 2000s, Mr. Barenboim led the Chicago Symphony Orchestra, Staatskapelle Berlin, and the West-Eastern Divan Orchestra on 3 separate international tours. He also continued to perform as a soloist while giving lectures and holding master classes. In 2005, Mr. Barenboim conducted a benefit concert with Staatskapelle Berlin and soloists Placido Domingo, Thomas Quasthoff, and René Pape for the victims of the 2004 tsunami in Southeast Asia. In the same year, while overcoming political hurdles, Mr. Barenboim led the West-Eastern Divan Orchestra to bravely achieve the unthinkable, an iconic concert at the Cultural Palace in Ramallah. The historical event sent an electrifying ripple internationally, extending beyond the musical world, becoming a successful model of dialogue and cooperation, and raised people's hope in peace. On September 21, 2007, the International Day of Peace, Mr. Barenboim was designated the United Nations Messenger of Peace by the Secretary-General Ban Ki-moon. In the same year, he was also awarded with the Goethe Medal in Germany, the Praemium Imperiale in Japan, and the Royal Philharmonic Society Gold Medal, one of the most prestigious honors in classical music. In January 2008, Mr. Barenboim gave a benefit concert in Ramallah to raise medical funds for children in the Gaza Strip. He was then granted Palestinian citizenship and became the first person in the world to retain both Israeli and Palestinian passports. Mr. Barenboim stated that he was very happy to accept it as it symbolizes the everlasting bond between the Israeli and Palestinian people. At the end of the year, Mr. Barenboim led the West-Eastern Divan Orchestra to perform at the United Nations General Assembly for the 60th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. In 2011, the maestro took the Divan Orchestra on an international tour, including the Doha Festival of Music and Dialogue, and performed in the Korean demilitarized zone. With Mr. Barenboim's help, the United Nations coordinated a special concert at the Gaza Museum of Archaeology in 2011. He conducted the Orchestra for Gaza, which consisted of volunteer musicians from Berlin Philharmonic, the Berlin Staatskapelle, the Orchestra of La Scala, the Vienna Philharmonic, and the Orchestra de Paris. The musicians were escorted in a convoy of UN vehicles and was the first ever concert of this caliber seen in the Gaza Strip. In June 2019, just before his 50th anniversary for conducting the Berlin Philharmonic, Mr. Barenboim was named the orchestra's first honorary conductor. The Staatsoper Berlin also extended Mr. Barenboim's tenure as its general music director to 2027 with deep appreciation for his exceptional work. In 2020, Mr. Barenboim and the West-Eastern Divan Orchestra were awarded the prestigious Rheingau Music Prize by the Rheingau Music Festival in Germany. He was described as not only one of the most renowned conductors and artistic personalities of our time, but also a great humanist, free thinker, and visionary of inestimable social value. Even as Mr. Barenboim moves towards his 80s, the maestro continues to garner recognition with his amazing stamina and immense creative energy through performances, conducting, teaching, and humanistic endeavors. We send our heartfelt best wishes to Mr. Daniel Barenboim and look forward to seeing more of his celebrated works shine a light on our world. Radiant viewers, thank you for your company today during Daniel Barenboim, A Life Fostering Peace Through Music, Part 2 of 2.
Up next is Team Thorpe, Vegan, Campaigning for a Vegan World, Part 2 of 2, right after noteworthy news.
In the grace of the divine, may all people opt for a peaceful and compassionate lifestyle that aligns with the way of heaven.
Our programs offer many languages. Please visit suprememastertv.com/schedule and suprememastertv.com/AJAR.
Be vegan. Make peace.